Welcome everybody for being here today. This is inside OPRF Museum, and this is one of the monthly virtual programs that we do from Oak Park River Forest Museum. Today we have a very special guest who is going to be sharing a brief history of St. Edmund Church in Oak Park. And I'm probably going to say the word brief very often here because our special guest, Don Giannetti, can probably fill a couple of books worth and certainly a couple of hours worth of information on the church. But we will try to keep it to 30 minutes today. So quite a challenge, but a good one. And I would like to start by having you introduce yourself a little bit, Don, and talking more about how you got started with being affiliated with the church and growing up in Oak Park. Talk about more of how you are involved with the church.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Giannetti, and I've been in Oak Park. I think my folks moved to Oak Park in June of 1935, and I came along in July of 1935. So as of this July, I will have been in Oak Park 87 years and a member of St. Edmund Parish for 87 years. I have a brother that's a little bit older than I, and I always laugh because I say Frank was made in Italy. And my parents, and he's 14 months older than I am. But my parents were so much ahead of their time because the second son was made in America. So I'm the American-made kid, but Frank is really a super special person. So, and I guess they never bought again. So anyhow, I grew up in Oak Park speaking Italian before I spoke English. My folks insisted on that. I mean, they wanted us to speak Italian. Many Italian families wanted their kids to speak American, become so American, whatever else. My family wanted me to learn to speak English well, because then we could do the family businesses and other things like that. But they still, and the nice thing about it, my folks were not that well educated, they didn't formal educated, they were smart people, but they could have only taught me broken English if we spoke English at home. And so I learned English from going to school and the family, the friends that we played with at 3 years old. We had a playmate we lived on Marion Street, and it was Henry Bowman, and he lived in what was the Plaza Hotel. There were a lot of down and out people. Remember, this was the Depression in the 30s. And we spoke, and a young kid doesn't, and Frank was older than I am, so I learned things from him. And a young kid doesn't have to talk about philosophy or wars or insurance and all that kind of stuff. So, and I went to kindergarten at Emerson School, which is now, I think, what is it now? It's the middle school. It's the middle school on Washington and what it is.
Yeah, no, that's Brooks.
It's Brooks School, because the Catholic schools didn't have kindergarten in those days. And then I went to St. Edmund's for 8 years. And we were taught by the Adrian Dominicans, and they were wonderful teachers and wonderful people. And, you know, my mother and father were our first teachers, of course, and taught us our values and our culture. And as I say, St. Edmund Schools was a good place for us. So I was always there. I was an altar boy. Now they have altar servers, and some of you might know what the difference is. And the first pastor came to Oak Park. He came in 1907, St. Edmund Church. He came in 1907, and he was still alive when I was growing up. I always thought he was old, but I mean, I'm just about as old as he is when he died. So he was, in those days, you died with your boots on. You were a pastor forever, for life. And so he was a pastor of St. Edmund's for almost 50 years. He died in October. If he had lived in June, it would have been 50 years as pastor of Oak Park. Now,
so let's use this to move on to our next slide, because I have a photo of the gentleman that you're talking about.
Yes.
And that's Father John Code.
Right. It was Father John Code. He was a curate or an associate at the Holy Name Cathedral, and he came to Oak Park to found the first Catholic parish in the village. Now, at that time, St. Catherine's was around their church buildings were around Washington and and Central around that area. And they did not move their buildings into Oak Park till 1917. So the few Catholics that were in Oak Park in 1907, this was 1907, those on the east side went to St. Catherine's, those on the west side went to St. Luke's. Now, St. Luke's is an old parish, and so is St. Catherine's, but St. Edmund's was the first Catholic parish founded in Chicago, in Oak Park. St. Ascension came in about 3 or 4 weeks later, so we're still number one. and St. Giles came in 1927. So the boundaries of St. Edmund's were Madison Street on the south. It went all the way up to North Avenue until 1927, and then Harlem Avenue on the west and Kohler Avenue on the east. After 1927, the boundaries went up to Chicago Avenue. Now there's 2 historical districts in the St. Edmund Parish. It takes up the whole thing. The Richland District and the Floyd Reich District are completely in St. Edmunds, mostly in St. Edmunds. So St. Edmunds is almost all in a historical district. Ascension has a Gunderson district in it. St. Catherine's has the Oak Park side has the Ridgeland district in it, and St. Giles has part of the Frank Lloyd Wright district on the south end. Anyhow, Father Code was asked to found a parish in Oak Park, and he came, and people were not so happy that he was coming. This was kind of a white Protestant community, and they were not looking forward to this group of Catholics coming in, because once you build your church, they're going to come, and they did. So he was trying to have a first mass said. The first mass in the village said, and he couldn't find anybody to rent a place for him. So now he finds that he was able to rent the barn of the Scoville Institute. Now, the Scoville Institute was the house in Scoville Park, and Scoville didn't live in it anymore, but it was a girls' school, and the barn or the stable was made into a hall. So this was Scoville Hall. So the first mass was said in Scoville Hall. The pastor bought a lot. He wanted to buy his church property on Church Row, which is Lake Street. Well, the property he found had restrictive clauses. You could not build a Catholic church or school on this property. And this is 1907. So he came across the railroad tracks. He came south, and he bought 2 houses on the corner of Pleasant and Oak Park Avenue with a straw buyer. And so we have a copy of the title, and it shows the Dr. Roberts, who was E.E. Roberts' brother, sold the property to this man, who the next week turned the title over to the Catholic Bishop of Chicago. And the house that was on the front of the lawn there at St. Edmunds was the first rectory. Now, for the next 3 years, they were able to say Mass in Nakama Hall, which was directly east on Lake Street of the Scoville Block. The Scoville Block is where they have the Brazilian restaurant and the strikes on Lake Street. And then there's 3 Asian businesses directly east of that. That's where Nakama Hall was. It was a women's club, and Nakama meant something in, I think butterfly, I guess, in Japanese. It was a women's club. And so it was a dance hall at times, and it was whatever. And on Sunday, the ladies from the parish would pick flowers from the yards and bring it and decorate the stage and put up an altar, a portable altar. And that's where they had Mass for 3 years. Now, in the meantime, in the early part of the time, the John Farson had the Pleasant home. And so John Code was kind of enterprising, and he asked him if he could use the grounds for a fundraiser. And that they had something like 3,000 people there, and they made money to pay for the 2 lots that they bought. And it kind of broke the ice for the Catholics coming into Oak Park. Then Father Code decided to build his church, and he hired Henry Schlacks, who was a famous in the Chicago area. He was a famous ecclesial architect. He did some of the beautiful churches in Chicago, let's see, St. Ignatius and St. Adalbert and St. Mary of the Lake. And he did one non-Catholic church that I know. It's the St. John's Lutheran in Forest Park. He was of German descent. And so, but he did this beautiful building and rectory rendering. And the pastor there were only 50 Catholic families at the beginning, and he was afraid to burden them with this thing. And then in the meantime, this wonderful woman from the Prairie Shore area of Chicago moves into the parish.
So this, I think, is the next picture that you had, and this is sort of a human
Yes.
human interest story
And
that
it's
you
a
told me that goes along with
tragedy.
the funding of.
So this is Mary Melville. She moved into Oak Park. Her only daughter, she was from Ireland. Her only daughter, her husband was, she was a widow, and her husband was in the liquor distribution business, whatever that meant at that time, I don't know. But anyhow, they had this wonderful little daughter, and I think Mary was older. She came from Ireland, and they married, and they had this daughter. And she was the organist part-time at the Old St. James on South Wabash Avenue. And she was stalked by a Chicago detective who wanted to be the boyfriend, I guess, but she didn't want him. So one Sunday coming out of church, he follows her and has a confrontation with her, and he shoots her and kills her. And then he shoots himself. And the mother, of course, is distraught, and she moves to Oak Park to a quieter area. And she thought that this would be a wonderful, so she donates $50,000 to St. Edmund Parish to build the church. And in those days, $50,000 built the church, not the windows and everything else in it, but $50,000 built the church.
Absolutely.
And as the church building was going up in 1909, she died. She died. And the interesting thing is, several years ago, I went down to call the Catholic cemeteries to see if she was buried in Mount Carmel or in Calvary, which is where the old Irish are. Well, they were really interested because they only have 2 graves in this 50 plot area, and you can't get graves in Calvary. And thinking, why can't they just sell them? I mean, because you really they said because they didn't know where the bodies were buried. Anyhow, so this is the story. And she died before, so when they dedicated the church in 1910, so within 3 years, we had the permanent church building. And that's the usual thing, is you build a school with an auditorium, and that becomes the church. And then when you have money, you build the church. But we built the church first. And I think the idea was that we had to show that we weren't going to build a shack. We're not the shanty Irish, whatever it was. And you had to show that you could build something beautiful. And the fact is that St. Edmund's at the beginning was the church on a residential street, all the way up from Pleasant to the tracks were homes. And so if you notice, most of those buildings are kind of 1920s or whatever else it is. And I mean, those were all houses were torn down to build these other things. So anyhow, so that was the story of the church coming to Oak Park. And the school wasn't built for 10 years. So within 3 years, they had the permanent church building and the rectory. And the rectory has been there since 1909. In 1925, they added the mansard, which was always designed to be there. In the 70s, the rectory was renovated to have office spaces and all kinds of things.
Because you told me that Father Code's family, a lot of his family members lived in the rectory early
They
on?
did. His mother lived in the rectory. His brother, who was a priest, was the first associate. He had a brother was a doctor who lived there. His sister Etta, who was the organist and lived there. Mama died in 1915, and Etta, I think, died before Monsignor did. The other people died before, or married, or whatever they did. And so, the other thing I wanted to mention is that Oak Park, when they had some wealthy Catholics living in Oak Park, but they could not join the country clubs or the tennis clubs. Oak Park River Forest. So the Catholics with Monsignor Code, he became a Monsignor when I knew him, went out and they started the Butterfield Country Club. And he went out dressed in lay clothes to buy the farm for the country club. I think for most of all, because I think they didn't want him to inflate the price. So I mean, I think that this wealthy people want to build a country club up here. This is really a good deal for us. So anyhow, so if you ever go to the Butterfield Country Club, you will notice that there's Monsignor Code's picture there. His brother, Dr. Code, is there, and some very wealthy Oak Parkers and River Forest people of that time. So that's another interesting side. So anyhow, now he's going to build a school.
Let's see if I have a picture of that. Actually, I think I might have. Next up, I have a picture of the rectory. So
okay, the rectory is the rectory, and on the front lawn of the rectory at one time, there was this fountain, and it's Moses striking rock, and the deer panting for living water, and the angels flowing with the water and the thing. And I think it became kind of an attractive nuisance eventually, and another pastor took it out. The rectory has been renovated twice. I mean, in the 60s, it was really a residence. And the main office was the parlor, and a priest who was on duty, the maid would call him in, and he would come down and accommodate whatever the person needed. Then through the 60s, they had they decided to make parish offices, and they lowered ceilings, and they had pipes and air conditioning and everything else. And through the years, it caused mold, and they had asbestos in the rectory and everything else. And Father John McGivern, who is our pastor now, has been here for 18 years. And he came and found that it was an unhealthy place. And we were told to gut it to the studs, to make it a healthy place for people to work and to live. And the rectory, I guess, was what 1960s had, and almost all the walls were paneling. They dropped the ceiling so they could have pipes through it for the air conditioning or whatever else it is. And I used to call it the Wisconsin Dells look, because I mean, it was all paneling. I mean, you think you're in a cabin in the woods. But anyhow, with a lot of help and with a lot of struggle, and really with the pastors, really with his leadership, the rectory was restored. We had a fundraiser, and the rectory was finished a couple of years ago.
And I'm sure a lot of you on the call today, especially, can remember what a feat that is.
Well, it is. And then just as it was ready to be open to people, just show it to them, the pandemic came across, and then poor Father John, he should have been there only 12 years because that's the normal time you stay in a parish nowadays. Got to stay because of the pandemic, and he wanted to be able to live in the rectory that he had renovated for a while. So, and we're going to lose him in June. So we have a beautiful rectory, but we're losing our good friend and Father John McGivern. Now, 1907 was the 100th anniversary of St. Edmund Parish. And under Father John's leadership, I call him Giovanni, by the way, anybody gets to be Italian for him. He had a wonderful team together to plan this 100th celebration. Now, as a result, we went back to Scoville Park for a Mass in the park. We went back to the original site of the first Mass in St. Edmunds, and we processed up Oak Park Avenue from the church. And it was beautiful. I mean, there were women in the parish made quilt banners and so anybody who was in the parish the first 25 years who had family, I mean, walked behind that banner. And then the next 25 years, and the next 25 years, and the next 25 years. And we had the school children carrying banners with white, and they were placed on the stage in Scoville Park. And in the afternoon, there was a picnic in Nils Park, which was the Farson Hills house, where they used to have a fundraiser in August of 1907. So it was a wonderful, wonderful celebration.
And a really great way to mark the history of
yes.
Pieces of history.
Right. And from being a parish that was not wanted, a church that was not wanted, Oak Park through the years has become a very welcoming parish. If you come to St. Edmunds, you're going to find somebody that looks like you.
So I want, while we're on this slide,
I was talking about the school too. Yeah, okay.
we'll get to the school hopefully just a little bit of time.
Sure.
I just want to sort of debrief to say that one of the things that struck me the most as I was going through the church, because I had not been into the church until last week, really seeing the space for the first time. And one of the things that struck me the most, as Don was telling me about a lot of the renovations that you've done to even just the church, was how it reflects how much the community has grown and changed over time, and how you've been able to serve the needs of the parishioners in the community. And so that's why there have been quite a few times where the look of the church has changed significantly, or the way that you use the inside has changed, but always to accommodate more people or
the worship styles. The church was, Monsignor Code had the church decorated 3 times in his lifetime. The first time this was John Foote, who was very wealthy, and they built the Siena High School addition at one after he died, the family. He had the church decorated, but he had Monsignor Code call in the famous artists, and they decorated the church. Now, it wasn't quite as elaborate as it is now. Then 25 years later, he had his 50th anniversary, and the church was dirty because heating was dirty in that time, and he had it redecorated again. And while the sanctuary was very elaborate, and in a Catholic church, the sanctuary is where the altar is, and the nave is where the people are. And in a non-Catholic church, the sanctuary is the whole church building. He had it redecorated, but it was still more simple. The walls were made to look like fake stone, faux stone, like the outside. And then in the 50s, Monsignor Code had the scagliola altar and pulpit and baptismal font and stairs, and they from the faux marble, which is scagliola, he had real marble altars put in. So we don't have the Henry Schlacks. Henry Schlacks was the architect. We don't have the Henry Schlacks altars anymore. We have the pews. And then in 1970, yes, it was 1970, Cardinal Cody had Project Renewal. And as a result, they wanted to enlarge the church, because at that time we had 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 o'clock Mass at St. Edmund's with 600 seats. And the 9 o'clock Mass and the 11 o'clock Mass went over to the school, the overflow at 9, 10, and 11, 10. And priests only gave out communion. So we had several priests living in the parish, but they'd have to run back and forth to be able to be on time for giving out communion.
Absolutely.
And so the Murphy Hall was going to be the overflow Mass. And then, of course, guitars became popular. So then that became the space for the guitar Mass. People were leaving Oak Park because of the integration. They had evening Masses, so you didn't have to have all your Masses in the morning. They had lay ministers and everything else. But anyhow, so they built Murphy Hall. They took the side altars out. They put pews up there. They put this transept in, and they have all kinds of pews there. And then they had the Murphy Hall, but they used that as the guitar Mass. Another pastor invited the guitar Mass back into the church. He didn't want to. He wanted it to be one church, in a sense. I mean, with using one worship site. And the 5:30 Mass became the contemporary music Mass with Kathy Haypen, who had been there forever. I don't mean forever. She's not as old as I am. I don't want you to know that. And anyhow, so but then we didn't really need the whole church the way it was. And they actually changed the church somewhat to accommodate the new liturgy, where they had the altar facing the people. They took out the side altars. They took out the confessionals and built them into north transept, etc. Then in the about 22 or 23 years ago, we decided that the church needed cleaning and whatever else. And so the windows were restored. We were going to redo the church to match our new liturgy and to kind of keep the integrity of the building. And the walls by that time were 23 karat gold. And we were told that if we neutralize the walls, the windows would pop. Our windows are museum quality. They're designed by the Zettler company in in Bavaria. And what Zettler was to the Catholics, Tiffany was to the non-Catholics. So these are wonderful windows if you've never seen it. I think St. Edmund's has probably one of the most beautiful interiors in all of Oak Park. Now we go on to the next phase.
So this,
Oh yes, and this was one of the stenciling of one of the sides there.
right, which we actually have in the museum, the photo that you saw at the
Yes,
mural. We
those
have a
were,
piece
when they took
here.
the side altars out, they replicated the stenciling in the sanctuary. However, they used gold paint instead of the gold leaf that was in the sanctuary. So the gold leaf was more, whatever you want to call it, this more precious.
So with, for the sake of time, we'll talk maybe a minute about the school. You said it was built in
1917. It was opened in 1917. They had built a school, they had designed a school in 1914, but it was kind of a contemporary school looking building. And Cardinal Mundelein came to Chicago and he said, you're running, he said the Catholics are of age here and we don't have to build shabby buildings. I mean, so they went back to the drawing board and they drew, and actually the First World War stopped the building. It was slowed down, but by 1917 they were able to build. They built this beautiful Gothic building. The church is 14th century Gothic, English Gothic. The church is French Gothic, and it's built as a copy of the Palace of Justice in Rouen, France. So if you look it up, Rouen, you'll see how much it looks like that. And so, and the school, after 99 years, had to close, lack of enrollment. And so at one time, they must have had around 600 kids in the school because these old houses all around St. Edmund's were filled with children. I mean, nowadays you buy the house to restore it. At that time, they weren't worried about restoring, they just wanted to have space for their kids. And so, and people walked from church to school and everything else. So it was a walkable area. So now, anyhow, in the last 5 years, Cardinal Supich has come to Chicago and he started this program called Renew My Church. We found out that, congregations are getting smaller. We have old buildings, beautiful old buildings, but and in some areas they had national parishes. So you had 3 and 4 churches in one community.
Mhm.
One would be Polish, one might be German, one might be Italian, one might be the American church. And so they've had meetings, they've had groupings throughout the whole archdiocese. So and St. Edmund's was grouped with River Forest. Oak Park was grouped with River Forest. So we were with St. Luke, St. Vincent, St. Bernardine's, St. Giles, Ascension, and St. Catherine's. Now, the Oak Park pastors decided that that was too big. So River Forest and Forest Park went together and they formed St. Luke, St. Bernardine. And St. Vincent's is a Dominican parish. They own the property, so they can do whatever they like over there. So now the Oak Park parishes met. They started meeting last year. We were supposed to be going through the renewal this year, but we started last year because of the pandemic and the expenses and everything else. And the 4 Oak Park parishes each sent a group of 5 or 6 people to these meetings to see what kind of scenarios we could find for Oak Park. In the meantime, Ascension lost their pastor, and rather than assign a new pastor, Father Carl of St. Giles became the administrator. And then St. Catherine's lost their pastor, and Father John McGivern of St. Edmund's became the administrator at St. Catherine's. So we all got together and we learned that we really liked each other, that Oak Park has some kind of a charism. We have a real case for social justice, every one of us do. And, and St. Catherine's, we decided, well, they were a smaller group and maybe less able to maintain a budget, but they were very important because we're the poster child. Oak Park is a poster child for integration and equity and things. And part of the parish of St. Catherine's is in the Austin community. What kind of what would it say about Catholic social justice to have this beautiful monument closed? And the 3 other Oak Park parishes are going to help work and bring the evangelization into the Austin community and work and help their neighbors.
Oh, very interesting.
And so the grouping had thought maybe we would be just one Oak Park parish with 4 distinct worship sites. But the other scenario was that St. Giles would go with St. Edmund and Ascension would go with St. Catherine's, or St. Giles would go with St. Catherine's, and Ascension would go St. Giles. And that was the scenario that the Archdiocese accepted. So as of July 1st, all the Oak Park parishes will cease to be single parishes. And there will be 2 canonical parishes in Oak Park. And one will be St. Giles and St. Catherine's, the other will be St. Edmund and Ascension. And there might be new names, it might be a hyphenated name, there might be another name. So,
but it sounds like being able to have more opportunities to work together,
yeah,
gathering more people together.
right, right, exactly.
Is going
right.
to help.
And then the next phase of it is evangelization. We have a lot of young people who don't come to church anymore. We've got the high rises in Oak Park. In the St. Edmund parish, and we're the downtown parish, but I mean, we don't have the people to help us do this. And combining with Ascension will give us a lot of young people and help. So we're looking forward to it. The sad thing is we're going to lose Father John, but he's still in our hearts, will be in our hearts. And so,
Absolutely.
And we're going to give him a wonderful send-off in June. So you'll hear all about it.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time. This was perfect. So with 4 minutes left, if we have anybody who has some questions for Don today, maybe we can get 1 or 2 of them covered in our meeting, or I will give you my contact information on the screen, and you can feel free to take that and email me with questions afterwards, or take a look for more programs on our website there as well.
If you've never seen St. Edmund Church, call the parish office, and we'll make an arrangement to give you a tour. And actually, I was a teacher in Chicago till I was 58 years old, and I got a golden parachute. And then St. Edmund said, "We have a job for you," which really, I didn't think they would pay me. I didn't want them to pay me. But anyhow, they insisted to pay me $1,000 a year, but that with raises, I'm up to $1,400 a year. It has put me in a big tax bracket, and I just can't afford to.
So what is your title? Do you have?
They call me the parish assistant, and I'm kind of the parish assistant, and I'm kind of the jack of all trades. I mean, I train the altar servers, I help out with it. I do the ordering for the sacristy. I set up for the masses. I open the doors sometimes in the morning. And I'm the all-purpose person. I'm the parish historian. I do.
Don, how about the convent?
The convent?
The convent. The first convent was in the balcony. Was under the balcony in the church, in the school auditorium, in the hall. Then they bought the building, which is where the newer building is, and that became a house. Then they bought the house that was behind the rectory, and they thought that might be George Maher house. No, the house was behind the school right there. And then we had fewer nuns, and so they decided to sell it. And we're sorry we did, but I mean, once you sell the property, you can't buy it back because the prices just kept going up and up and up. And so, but it's a beautiful old building, and I mean, the people have really taken good care of it, and they've restored things. They took out the shag carpeting and all kinds of wonderful things that was through the years, and all the wonderful furniture that used to come from the rectory the nuns got it. Wasn't it wonderful? And so, but no, it was a wonderful story. We had the 8 Dominicans. They were wonderful, wonderful ladies. And the school, just as I say, then went into lay principles and things. And but I mean, it was still a good school, but the people didn't support it as it should have been. And so we couldn't maintain it.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time here, so I want to thank you, Don Giannetti, very much for being here.
Thank you for doing this for me, helping me do this.
What a wonderful opportunity to capture some of your knowledge, some of the history of this wonderful institution, and to hear all of you on the call sharing your stories of going to the church and the school, and so thank you for being here.
And I want to thank Rachel, and I want to thank Frank Lipo for inviting me to do this. Frank Lipo was, and when in my day, is a Don Giannetti on steroids. He's just all over the place, more than I am. So thank you much.
Well, nobody can take your place, and so
So
I'm very
happy
grateful
St.
to have
Patrick's Day and a happy St. Joseph's Day on Saturday.
Absolutely. And
Yes, that's Saturday.
we'll hopefully see you all next time. Thank you very much.